We're thrilled to be focusing on the arts today, critically important at this moment in time, and who could be a better spokesperson than Jill Paulsen? Jill was named Executive Director of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture on February 12th of this year. She had served as interim director for over a year and a half, and her performance in that role made it abundantly clear that she fully deserved the top spot. Previous to that, she had worked for many years in Cuyahoga Arts and Culture in different leadership roles where she oversaw, get this, $130 million in grant making to over 400 organizations. Huge responsibility. Jill is personally committed to harnessing the power of the arts to drive change, to seek justice, and to spark creativity and innovation. What could be more important at this moment in time? She's also determined to give voice to community artists and led the charge in funding a resident-led program for the arts in Cleveland and East Cleveland. In addition to all of this, she gives back. She's working on the 2020 Census and Complete Count Committee, Cuyahoga County Monuments Commission. She's previously served on AIDS Funding Collaborative and the Carolines Health Center. While her roots are in Minnesota, where she grew up, we are thrilled that she is fully transplanted and growing roots even deeper here in Cleveland. In addition, she's a proud member of the Leadership Cleveland class of 2017. Jill, thank you so very much for weighing in and sharing important information with us today.
Thank you, Marianne. It's a treat to be here. And I'm looking at the screen right now, seeing so many friends and colleagues, and that makes me a little less nervous and a little more excited. Admittedly, a few of you on this call could be giving this presentation with me because while I'm going to be sharing some highlights of what's happening in the arts and culture community right now, many of you are the ones doing the work, doing the hard work and making the smart decisions every day. So I'm sure that will thread through, hopefully in some of my comments, but also as we get to the questions, Rachel, because I do want to spotlight the amazing people on this call who, as I see their names, I'll be able to reference. But folks I'm seeing tuning in from current grantees and arts and cultural leaders here, nice and wonderful friends, and even some folks from out of state that we have connections to. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. I will start my comments by doing what we normally do at Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, and this is where I'd call your attention to a link in the feed there for you. Thank you so much, Rachel. While I won't spend time today reading through it, please know that it's important practice of our agency, and I encourage your business and organization to do as well, is to think about doing land acknowledgements, not only just this week as we celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, but also as we consider our work moving forward in the business sector, nonprofit, and government like me, how we can do work in a more just fashion, particularly that really acknowledges the land on which we stand. For CAC, this also means an important statement connected to Black Lives Matter. So again, take a moment at some point in the next day to review the statement. Would love your feedback. And as always, please tune into our work. We're at cacgrants.org/equity, and you can learn more there. And we'd love to continue that work with you as well. So wanted to call attention to that important practice that we do at our agency. So now I'm down to like 9 minutes, right? So how am I going to engage you, share a little bit of information and not depress you? I think that's what I'm going to try to achieve today, but also do a nice reality check, particularly as I want to, again, shine that spotlight on the leaders on this call doing the work. So a little bit about Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, just a little bit. We are a public agency, and we are the recipients of tax dollars that we then distribute throughout the community. We are responsible to all of you as residents of Cuyahoga County, and I am a public servant. And my job is to serve you and all of the residents. And so I think that's a piece you'll see thread through all of the conversation today. Our mission is about strengthening the community and investing in arts and culture. And we do that with grants every single year to a couple hundred organizations, some that I see here on the call today, those that are quite small, neighborhood block resident-led, all the way up to some larger institutions that I know you're all familiar with in the Rock Hall, the Cleveland Playhouse, Karamu House, and the like. So just a good mix. I think if you live in the county, you'll see from this map, there's probably something happening in your neighborhood. And that's the normal practice. But now we're in COVID, right? So let's think about that. Where our grant making has been about 200 million since we started. And it's about 12.5 million this year. And more in the details if you'd like. But I think the important piece is to call out We're in every area of the county. We're here to serve you, and we're really here to support arts and cultural organizations doing the amazing work they do. Now, obviously, Mary Ann talked about when I officially stepped into this role, it was about the time that COVID came into play. That said, I've been at the agency now for 9 years or so, and have really gained a true appreciation for the work of cultural workers, artists, and creatives in this town, and that includes the administrators who run the organizations we fund. This is a massive sector, and I'm going to pull out for a second. While CAC is only focused on nonprofits, if you pull back and look at our peers and friends in the community that are also in the arts and cultural sector, we're talking businesses, venues, Happy Dog, the Grog Shop, galleries, clubs, individual artists, folks that you hopefully buy stuff from on Etsy, who are here based in Cleveland. We've got a large sector. It's 9.1 billion in our region, employment of a little over 62,000, and we're talking about some labor income of over $3 billion. So I just paused to let those numbers sink in, because I think, in the hubbub of all the headlines that we've been facing in recent months, that one really hasn't come to the top. We're thinking about the importance of sports, and of course I love sports, or we're thinking about the importance of our tourism and restaurants, hospitality, definitely important, but I think I'd like to make sure we call out today the important role that arts and culture plays in our community. I did hear our colleagues at the Ohio Citizens for the Arts indicate that the arts and culture community in our sector is larger than the agriculture sector in Ohio. So just an important moment to kind of focus on and maybe challenge what some of us might think about when we think about arts and culture. Now we talk about what's been happening with COVID. And unfortunately, some of us here on this call are living it every single day. You've taken furloughs, you've taken pay cuts, you've had to make hard decisions to lay folks off. I'd call your attention to that number there, 37% job loss this time over last year. Again, the biggest drop for the arts and culture sector of any in this state. So something, again, from the Bureau and Labor Department, but wanted to call your attention to, and also wanted to thank my colleagues, Arts Cleveland, for helping pull that information for us in preparation for some important advocacy that we're doing over the next couple of weeks. So that's what's happening on a large scale. Let's kind of zoom on down more to the work of CAC and what you all might be most familiar with when you think about arts and culture. And those are the nonprofits. That's the Rock Hall. That would be Feluke Cultural Arts. That would be maybe the local block club down the street from you who does a street festival, and it's run by volunteers, but they get grants from CAC. We do a couple of hundred grants a year. So everything from $1,000 up to over $1.5 million. So they really are sizable grants and important across the county. We did, of about 250 of our organizations, we surveyed more closely those that receive a bulk of the money, and that was about 65 of them. We asked them back to reflect back on what happened to your organization from March up until June. So again, these numbers are dated, which means what I'm telling you is probably not even the headline that it would be today, but we heard directly back from just 65 organizations. Of course, it's the bigs, right? When we think about the orchestra, the Rock Hall, the Art Museum, but it's also talking about Ukrainian Museum, Shaker Historical Society, Dobama, a lot of the small theaters there in the middle, all of our small galleries as well. We saw a job loss of over 2,500, a steep revenue loss of 42 million. And I'm going to pause there because in coming weeks and days, as you hear coming out of the state, some ideas about arts funding, and particularly with DeWine and some CARES and other conversations that are happening, the numbers might seem large, but imagine that just 65 organizations here in Cleveland, just for about 4 months, are reporting a loss of 40 million. I think you begin to see any funding we can get is important, but oftentimes it's just the tip of the iceberg for the challenges our groups are facing. We also saw, and you see it because I know lots of you on this call are frequenters at lots of organizations. I see you at festivals, I see you at shows and concerts. We saw organizations that we support reporting cancellations of over 6,500 events. I think if you were on the Playhouse Square listserv just this week, they were talking about having canceled themselves over 600 events, right? So we're seeing the reality of doors are closed, stages are empty. One piece that I didn't put on here, but maybe as we look to kind of this glimmer of hope, if there is one, we have seen thousands of events from groups that we fund that they've created in response to COVID, pivoting online, going digital, thinking in new ways about how to serve residents. So that's something we can come back to. So it's not all negative, but oftentimes folks are doing that for free. They're doing it without the revenue that they need to keep themselves open. And they're really doing it for their mission, but it isn't always helping their bottom line. So that's where we're at as a community here when we look at cultural organizations. Can we flip to the next one, Rachel? So how long is it going to take to recover? You know, I think if I would have given you this slide probably 2 months ago, it would have really surprised you. I think we're all at this point right now, right? That I just heard yesterday, some of the big institutions or the big corporations across the nation aren't anticipating sending back employees to the office till summer of 2021, right? And we haven't had those conversations maybe as much locally here, or at least at our organization, but we are working from home. Here I am in my living room. My daughter's in the next room over doing virtual kindergarten. So we're all in this place that we know what we thought was going to be done just in 2 days or 2 months rather is now stretching. Before I turn to Q&A, I would call your attention to that top line there, arts, entertainment, and recreation. According to McKinsey and Company, we're talking about a recovery span and estimated recovery of 4 to 5 years. So that means 2025 until we anticipate seeing revenue return for our sector. And again, if we go back to the scale and scope of what it means across our state, I think that's something really substantial to think about. I think I have 2 quick more slides. Now, this one is just one maybe for you to think about. And if you want to put a moment there on the into the screenshot, I'd appreciate knowing like what you miss most about arts and culture, typing that into the Q&A, or what you're looking forward to seeing return. When I was putting together this slide, I think there was for me an obvious set of bullets, but I realized everyone here on this call, as I'm looking through all the different names, have a different perspective, right? And for some of us, it's about jobs. So we're talking about thousands of jobs. We're talking about tax income and revenue for the city of Cleveland and other communities. For some, it's talking about, about education. We've got kids in school, or we want strong communities. And right now, our kids don't have as much access to arts education. Or if they do, it's dependent on arts organizations doing it for free, oftentimes, and anticipating that folks actually have internet, which isn't always the case, right? We also have to talk about why arts matters in our community, because we're talking about social justice and change, in particular in this moment that we're in, when we're finally dealing with and talking about structural racism and how that affects all of us. To me, the idea that arts can be there to bring up messages. I know at one point, I think Laura Kepley was going to be on this call from the Playhouse, but that's a theater, and Kevin Moore, that puts front and center, what does it mean to change the conversation, and they do it on stage. Now they're having to re-envision how they do it, tune in and watch them online. But so I think what I'm trying to say is arts and culture should matter to everyone. Before this job, I'll admit I didn't always think of myself as an arts and cultural person. Maybe I am compared to the general mix, but my paintings that I do and the drawings I do are just for me. I'm not going to share them with other folks. So while I'm not an artist, I've quickly come to understand at this job and in previous positions why the arts matter to all of us. So just wanted to kind of put that moment all there for you. And I appreciate seeing some of the notes you have. I think I like that, kind of informal comment folks are saying about sometimes it's just about gathering, right? It's fun to watch something online, but sometimes it's just fun to be together. And I'll close it out. I think I have one more slide before we move on to questions and answers. And for me, I thought, well, I know what CAC is doing as a public agency, right? We're moving dollars quicker. We're kind of going out a little bit over our skis in some of our grants and keeping them consistent so folks can have that bridge money as they look to any potential government funds. We're doing some advocacy, working really in direct collaboration with our friends at Arts Cleveland. We've got a local PAC here too that does well. And again, calling out the venues that we've been working with pretty frequently over the last few months. So we're organizing and we're advocating as it's allowed as a public agency, and really relying on our colleagues in the other sectors to have our backs as we push forward for the arts. I think what I'd ask all of you to do is, you're doing it already, but vote, organize, fill out your census. I think today is the last day because of some political maneuvers. Donate and buy art now, and buy local art, and invest in organizations and renew those memberships. They might be closed, but that flexible cash is really important to them right now. And then, of course, participate when doors are open. So I think, one person here mentioned the idea of art is what makes us human. Art is also something that can heal. Again, coming back to the big picture of where we're all at in this period of trauma with COVID, be it because your business is closing, you're worried about laying folks off, or others, I think it's just an important moment to realize we're in this together, but let's focus on how we can help the arts and cultural sector do our part and really raise up those voices that might not otherwise be heard. So that's, I think, where I might end it here, a kind of look at arts and culture here locally in Cleveland. Super shout out to everyone I see on this call. It's so nice to see friendly faces.
Jill, thank you so much. And we have had some questions come in. So to start, what kind of levers does your organization have to help incentivize and support creative efforts from arts organizations to find new ways to connect with audience that are revenue generating, but while at the same time kind of providing that much needed operational support?
Yeah. Well, I think the basic thing for us, and this is just a good, mechanism for anyone who has cash, be it an individual donor or a government agency like ourselves or a private philanthropy, and that's trust who you're giving the money to, right? So trust them, engage them, and that means for us, flexible operating support. So I know there are really smart people leading organizations, and if we give them the bandwidth to do what they need to do, particularly in this time of crisis, then they can make the decision and they're not caught having to somehow develop a new program just to that won't fund itself, that will put them further in the hole, right? Instead, what we want to do is provide folks flexible dollars so that they can make the decisions they need. So I know that's kind of a generic answer, Rachel, but I think that's also what we can do as individual donors too, right? Not just give to get the tchotchke or focus on, one specific line item that matters to you, but really trust the groups you're investing in. So that's what I would note. We are seeing a lot of innovation from folks. And so, some of it's because they have to. And I saw Patrick is on this call from Film Festival, and he and I just did a panel together yesterday, and I love the Film Festival. And they are amazing right now in how they're completely pivoting their business model. They probably thought it was going to happen anyways over time, but it has collapsed and they've done it in months. And now they're moving forward. So just, shout out there, and they're not alone, right? There's tons of folks I see on this call who are doing the same thing.
So someone asked about Arts Cleveland just released a great report on expanding access to the arts for people with disabilities. What impact do you think that COVID will have on the implementation of these suggestions?
Steve Hansler, thank you for the shout out to the article and the report by Arts Cleveland. I knew that's you, right? Is it? Okay, good. I'd say make sure everyone take a look at that report. As Steve mentioned, it just came out from our sister organization, the kind of advocacy research organization, artscleveland.org. I think what we're seeing again is that accelerating of, maybe before people thought they should do something, they felt guilted into doing something. I think now they're realizing it's good for their business model, right? If we're doing stuff online, I'll give you one example for us. We do our grant making generally on public panels. So maybe last week or the week before, our team ran our grant making panels on a forum just like this. It was the first time we'd done it with video in our 13-year history. It was the first time we did it online in our 13-plus-year history. I think related to Steve's question, it was the first time for us that we paid someone to do closed captioning because we realized this format doesn't work for everyone. And it's important for us to change our work as well. So that's a very granular CAC related example. I know, again, as I look through some folks here on this list, Patrick mentioned doing some of that work already through their film festival and the work they're doing now, having gone digital. I guess I'd be interested in other examples folks have. We're seeing it come out from plenty of the groups we support. I think that's where I'd stop.
So how might your triage process for distribution change with the COVID impact?
Yeah, I think now, I didn't mention the details of our funding. We are a tax a public agency that receives a public tax, it is on cigarettes. So I did want to call folks' attention to that, because that's an important thing to mention is this is a tax on residents of Cuyahoga County. Therefore, the dollars should go back to residents. That is diminishing, which is great, right? From a public health perspective, from a justice and change, from a health perspective, it is important that that revenue source goes down, that people smoke less. But that means for us, we need to start thinking about what next, how we can work with others. And so I think that is the piece that I'm focused on right now with a bunch of other colleagues here in town is we need to remain strong in what we do with operating support. That's always the core of what we're going to do. We invest in arts and culture. We're in the Ohio Revised Code. So it's like, that's what they tell us to do. And that's what we got to do. But I think there's another element of it as we can begin to think about need and who's being most affected, right? Let's think about some small and mid-sized organizations that have real infrastructure needs, that have real employee needs, but they don't have maybe the endowments or the access to the major donors that others do. They don't also have the ability to kind of go on what I know Arts Cleveland calls that pilot light cycle, where you can kind of just say, why don't we go into hibernation for a little bit? You know, we don't do our festival this year, but we'll come back tomorrow or next year or 2022 strong. These are places that employ thousands of folks. And so I think that'll be important. We're having conversations now with Gunn, Cleveland, lots of other private philanthropy as well, along with other public funders in the community here locally and at the state level to say, frankly, it's time to add to the pie. We've seen a growth in the number of groups that we fund from probably when I started. I want to say it was about 100 organizations that got funding. And now, any given year, it's at least 250. And that's great. The folks in the pool probably don't like that always originally, but what it means now is we're funding more Black and Brown led organizations clearly connected to community led by BIPOC leaders. So I think that moving forward is a place, COVID or not, that we need to continue to focus.
So given the long time frame for recovery, do you see losing some of the vibrancy of our arts community? Will some organizations be closing?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I pause because I don't want to seem flippant, right? I think we've had previous conversations with the media and kind of other campaigns I've seen that have been about like our stages are empty and our galleries are, quiet. And for me, I kind of like pivot and say, and our employees aren't there and we had to lay folks off. And now they can't pay for groceries. And now we need to head to the food bank, right? So it's like, for me, quickly a story about people and, artists or not, creative or not, it's really tough right now for people. And so we're seeing arts leaders, and again, I'm looking here through the list, quite a few on this call who are making super hard decisions. I think that's what I want to also highlight here. It's not like everyone's just, waiting on the government to do something for them or hoping one major donor comes in. They're every day looking at scenario planning. They have some of them, what happens if we don't open this year, next year? What if we're a band or a choral group and it's like we've been advised that we can't open probably for 3 years? What does that mean? So folks are doing that scenario planning, and some of them are also scenario planning their way out to sometimes what we call a dignified death. Or, working with others, right? That's the other piece is sometimes, and I don't mean full on merger, but, I think there's places where folks are beginning to see, a trend we've also seen, and I'd be interested if it was in other sectors. We've got quite a few leadership changes, open positions, executive director roles in arts and culture that are now open. And I think that speaks to kind of the brittleness of the community. We're already, seeing folks working their tails off, generally speaking, at a lot of these organizations for not too many dollars, limited benefits, not many 401ks, right? And that's not the case for the large institutions, but still, we've got plenty of groups, I think, that are right on the edge. You've seen some lately who have decided either to sell buildings, look at infrastructure, sell some of their collections. That's definitely all on the table.
And as you think about what you've seen and heard about those creative innovations, what are some of the most creative things you've seen for organizations to try to serve and survive?
I'll do a personal one. Some of folks know this if you're friends of mine on this call, but My daughter takes tap lessons at Caramoo House. So, we started before COVID and then COVID and no tap lessons. And we just re-engaged now. And she does tap lessons, Saturday mornings, sorry, downstairs neighbors, with her tap hat, her top hat and her little tap shoes on the computer. Now, it's not ideal, but at least she's getting to connect with new kids and people that are important to her. And I hope down the line, Caramoo House can find a way to monetize that, right? Because they are charging for it, but it does take a lot of time, but they're doing an amazing job. I already mentioned Patrick and the film festival, but that is like a complete change and shift in their model. I would say they do have an advantage, right? Because their product is something that's already, that we're comfortable watching on screens. Again, in Caramoo, CPT, Cleveland Public Theater, we've seen them do some really interesting things. And actually, Annisfield Wolf, I've got Karen Long on the call too. They've done stuff on good old-fashioned TV. And it's actually been really engaging. And what I loved, for instance, about Annisfield Wolf is I was able to send it to my friends in other communities that normally I say, this is my favorite night of the year culturally, come on down to Playhouse Square. Okay, I totally missed it this year, but I could watch it long distance with family and friends across the country. And that was super meaningful because it led to lots of other conversations. So I think we're seeing lots of innovation. I know the orchestra is kind of leading the pack. And as we see some folks across the country, particularly New York, who's saying no orchestra for another year, and our orchestra is trying to move forward with some business innovations, I think that is an entity too that's waking up and really fast forwarding. But it's one thing to be creative and innovative, and it's another to figure out how to monetize. A lot of these groups right now are at 15% capacity. So if you go, great, but Grog Shop has to open its doors and they can only fill 15% of the house. There's no way they can make it monetarily. So that's when we have to start thinking about relief packages in addition to innovation.
So as we look ahead, what can our community do to help ensure the survival of our wonderful arts and culture organizations?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to look and see if I can pick anyone from the list to shout out and showcase, but there are so many of them. I mean, on that last slide of mine, I talked about some of the policy level stuff, individual policy level stuff we can do, right? So get out and vote for leaders who not only care about the arts, but care about living wage, people and insurance, thoughtful public health policy, look at materials coming out of Policy Matters Ohio, vote for who will stand behind decisions that are important for residents. And then, use your dollars where they matter and be flexible with them and extend them. And I think, sometimes people will say arts and culture is kind of not the most important thing to be dealing with right now. Sure. I've had many calls with leaders who said, let's focus on food bank direct services and the like, but I don't want to forget the important role that arts and culture plays in our community and kind of those areas we talked about as far as jobs, kind of bringing hope to this time, bringing us together, even if we're distant. So use your money, use your power, use your voice. And I think it's a place where if you're willing to get behind and push for legislative change, make sure that arts and culture is included in CARES packages, right? Make sure that when you're speaking, hopefully, in future mayoral and other political issues that you're asking, like, what's the platform as it relates to my neighborhood, my community? And then demand of the arts and cultural organizations that they are responsive to what you need, right? Demand that they are doing something that's relevant to you and thoughtful and respectful of your community. And I think that's how we're going to move forward.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for all that you and your organization are doing to support the community. And I'm going to make reference here to Margie's comment. If at the end of this, there are not arts to enjoy, life will be so diminished. So thank you for this helpful conversation today. And please, for everyone on the call, reach out, support the organizations, because definitely this is something we want to make sure does not become a longer term impact. So Jill, thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Marianne.
Thanks, Rachel. And Jill, thank you. I think if the arts are diminished, we are diminished as a community. So thank you for your dedication to forging forward in these challenging times.